Hey, good morning, everybody. Russell here. I was thinking this morning that I've been doing these videos, and one area that I never talk about. Well, it's not that I don't talk about it. I mean, I talk about wellness and stuff like that, but is addiction. Many of you probably know a large part of my story is around addiction, and that was kind of like the thing that happened that got me into recovery, that got me eventually to, taking health and wellness and cultivating wellness in my life very seriously. And I realized on these videos, I never actually got in here to kind of tell you what is addiction. And so a lot of people, think they know what addiction is. A lot of people in AA, a lot of people that go to 12-step groups, think that they know what addiction is, and they actually don't. It's kind of interesting. I was in Alcoholics Anonymous for many years and didn't really clearly know what exactly addiction was. So I wanted to kind of outline that really quickly here for people that are interested. And it's not just around, so I want to, this model of addiction that I'm going to teach you comes out of the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. And it's really simple and it's really straightforward. And I think it's applicable to other things other than alcohol and drugs. So as I go through this, you can think about, you can apply this to food and say, am I a food addict? Or, sex can be an addiction. Gambling can be an addiction. But basically, in the book Alcoholics Anonymous, which was written back in the 1930s, they sort of define what alcoholism is. And one of the very first things that they talk about in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous is something called the physical allergy to alcohol. And so in other words, what happens is that people that are alcoholics, myself included, have an abnormal reaction to alcohol. And the word allergy is kind of confusing to people sometimes, so it's better to look at it as a compulsion. And what that means, and I can explain this. So what it means is when a person like myself takes any alcohol into my body, something is triggered inside of me that's not triggered in people that aren't alcoholic, where at that point I can't stop drinking. So in other words, I would start drinking and say to myself, I'm just going to have a couple of drinks, and then and tell myself that and really believe that, and then 12 drinks later, and I'm rolling in the morning, really early in the morning, and not able to get up for work the next day. You know what I mean? Even though I told myself I was just going to have a couple of drinks, once it was in my body, I couldn't stop. Towards the end of my drinking and using, what would happen is I would start drinking, then I would start doing cocaine, and then I would literally fall off the face of the planet for, anywhere from 2 to 3 weeks. And my family wouldn't even know where I was. They'd be calling me, and I'd be holed up in hotels and things like that. So that physical compulsion over the years progressed. And I'm over 10 years sober right now, but I'm pretty sure that if I picked up a drink right now, that same thing, I'm absolutely sure that if I picked up a drink right now, that same thing would happen. And I would be off and running. I wouldn't be able to stop once I started, and I would fall off the face of the planet and maybe not come back alive. It's literally that bad for me at this point in my life. Now, I want to be really clear that same thing happens for me with food. If I eat certain types of food, once I start, I can't stop. So maybe you're not an alcoholic or a drug addict, but you have issues with food. You might want to ask yourself, is this something that I can relate to in regards to my food? Is this something that I can relate to in regards to my sex conduct? Is this something I can relate to in regards to my gambling? Is this something I can relate to in regards to like Facebook and the internet and social media? Because those are real addictions. So anyway, once I start, I can't stop. For me, for me, that was, largely around alcohol and drugs and certain types of food that I eat. So, and here's the thing. So that's all fine and dandy, and I can get on a million diets. I can go to detox. I can get sober. I did it a million times, and usually somewhere between anywhere between 2 hours and 2 weeks after I make this promise to myself that I'm never going to drink again, what happens to me is, which is the second part of addiction, what happens to me is I have this mental obsession with it. I have this idea or this thought in my head that comes in and says to myself, you've been doing pretty good. Maybe this isn't as big a problem as you think it is. Maybe you can have a couple of drinks. And I tell myself that lie, and I go have, and it grows and grows and grows. So, and then, I may pick up those couple of drinks and I start the whole cycle over again, because once I drink that first drink, the physical compulsion starts and I'm off and running again. So, but remember, I'm sober. Maybe I'm sober like a week at that point. The only thing that happened was that I had this thought or this lie that I told myself that when I pick up the drink this time, it's going to be different. Knowing that years and years and time after time and hundreds and maybe even thousands of experiences have told me that I can't pick up that first drink. But my mind will tell me it's okay. So we call that the mental obsession. And there's a really great definition that I was given early in recovery, which is for the obsession, which is a persistent and reoccurring idea that's stronger than and doesn't respond to reason. A persistent and reoccurring idea that's stronger than and doesn't respond to reason. So in other words, when I get that thought or that idea in my head, it's persistent. So what would happen is I might be a week sober, or I'm on my diet, I'm doing really good, and I have that little thought that says, I kind of feel like it would be nice to have a couple of drinks right now. And then I tell myself, no, I can't do that because, I'm an alcoholic and that's really bad. And then what happens is that little thought starts to grow, and it starts to maybe I don't drink at that moment, but I'm headed that way. And it's this obsession that grows inside of me and eats away at me and eats away at me. And then even this obsession keeps me up at night, where I'm thinking about a drink. I'm thinking about, doing some cocaine, that kind of thing. Keeps me up at night. And then it grows and grows and grows, and it's persistent. And then eventually I go, screw it. I can't deal. And this is not exactly my thinking, but eventually I just do this thing where I just go and I give in to the obsession and I pick up that first drink. So the other part of it is that it doesn't respond to reason. So I can't, once I get the mental obsession, I can't really talk myself or think myself out of this. So in other words, once I really want to go drink or overeat or whatever the addictive behavior is, I have very rarely am I able to be like, no, that's not a good idea because this, that, and the other happens, and that deters me from picking up that first drink. It doesn't respond to reason. Even if I know, like as an example, my wife says, I'm going to leave you if you drink again. Even though I know the terrible consequences, I don't have the strength in the moment to not give in to that mental obsession. It doesn't respond to reason. I know people this wasn't my story, but I've known people that will literally pick up the night before they have to go do a urine test for their probation officer, and if the urine is dirty, they go to jail. You know what I mean? They give in to that mental obsession, they pick up that drink or that drug, and they're off and running. It doesn't respond to reason. It doesn't. I don't say, oh, in the past all these bad things happened because of my drinking. That doesn't deter me from picking up that first drink because it doesn't respond to reason. So that's a cycle of addiction. So it's basically a mental obsession, or the big book says a strange mental twist. Something happens mentally that sends me, and they talk about it being insane is really what it is. Why would I do that why would I pick up that first drink if past experience shows me what's going to happen every time. It's like they talk about it this way, putting your hand on a hot stove and keep trying to put your hand back on the hot stove, expecting it not to be hot and not to burn you. It's the same thing. So that mental obsession hits me, pick up that first drink, I'm off and running. Cycle of addiction. And this happens over and over and over again. And no matter how much I try to convince myself and promise everybody in my life that that's not going to happen, it keeps happening over and over and over again. And people do this until they die is really what happens. And it's, death from food is a little bit more subtle, takes a little bit longer than, say, like if you're, using fentanyl or heroin IV. So anyway, so those are the two main components. And then what I was taught about early on, this is what made the difference. Those two things, like I kind of knew that stuff. It was nice to get like a clear outline of those two things. But the thing that I was unclear about was, and as I was going through this with the person that was helping me early on in my step work, he was helping me define out of the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous what it means to be an addict. We went through those two things, and then in the middle, actually it's kind of off to the side the way we did it. There's a part in the big book that says people are restless, irritable, and discontent unless they can feel the ease and comfort that comes from taking a few drinks. And drinks that they see other people taking with impunity. So again, I can't have just a couple like people that aren't alcoholic because that physical compulsion starts. But so it was pointed out to me that, and this is where it was really interesting, because when I was doing this work with this person, I had about 6 years of sobriety, and I became really miserable, a lot of anxiety and depression, and ended up relapsing. And I was sober, but I was really unhappy in my life. So it's possible for people to get some period of sobriety, but to actually be miserable in that sobriety. And so the gentleman that was working with me looked at me and said, "Russell," referring to this restless, irritable, and discontent, he said, you don't have a drinking problem, you have a sober problem." And I had to kind of like really step back and say to myself and think about that. And it was a really profound moment for me, because I realized why I was so miserable in sobriety when I had those 6 years of sobriety. And it was because my problem wasn't the thing that I didn't have control over, the physical compulsion and the mental obsession. My problem was every time I got sober, I felt terrible. And yet, if you asked me how I was doing, I would say great, because I'm not drinking, right? Everything's supposed to be good because I'm not drinking anymore, not drinking and using drugs. So it really made me realize when it was phrased that way that I had a sober problem rather than a drinking problem. It made me realize that drinking and drugging and overeating and all the addictive behaviors in my life, those were actually a solution to how I felt sober. And when I finally realized that part of addiction, that the drinking and the drugging and the overeating, they were just simply symptoms that were treating this underlying baseline sober problem that I had, I all of a sudden realized what I had to do to get sober. Now, in that moment with that gentleman, it was pointed out to me that when I took the steps, the 12 steps, that would treat the restless, irritable, and discontent. So in other words, when we do step work, when we do recovery, we don't necessarily treat the drinking behavior directly. What we do is we get sober long enough to work a rigorous wellness program, is really what it is, a program of self-discovery, spiritual awakening, and a progression towards wellness. And if we focus on that, then what happens is the mental obsession that was always there, that preceded the first drink, goes away almost completely. And that was exactly what my experience was. As soon as I realized I needed to treat the sober person, I took that seriously. I started really looking at myself, which you do in the 12 steps. If you write a thorough fourth step, you do more work in a couple of weeks in a fourth step than you can do 10 years in therapy with somebody. And I'm a therapist, so I'm not trying to like knock therapy, but it's a written document. It's in the fourth step it's truly amazing. But I needed to look at that stuff in order to get better. So I did that stuff, and then all of a sudden I'm able to, it wasn't immediate, but fairly soon after I committed to working on my sober problem, that mental obsession that always led me back to that first drink completely went away. I mean, I don't get that anymore. I go through my day and I don't even think about drinking. I'll go by the liquor aisle in the grocery store. I don't even think about it. Same thing with food on Thanksgiving. Like, there's all the pies and cakes and all the stuff and on the table, like 8, 9, 10 of the things, and people are like literally gourting themselves. And it's not that I don't notice it, I see it, but I know, like, it just doesn't have that gut-wrenching thing that where I like want to do it so bad that I pick up that drink or I pick up the food. You know what I mean? So that's kind of like what addiction is, right? Physical compulsion, once I start, I can't stop. A mental obsession that precedes the first drink, that sends the cycle all over again. And an underlying restless, irritable, and discontent when I'm sober. And I just didn't know that. Like, I was in recovery for a long time and nobody ever outlined it that clearly to me. Once I learned that, I was like, oh, okay, I think I know what to do now, which is to cultivate a life of wellness. And if I don't do that, if I don't on a daily basis grow in my wellness and my spiritual growth, my personal growth, then I become susceptible to going back and relapsing. So anyway, that's my story. That's what addiction is. Please share this with people. This is kind of a long one. I had fun doing this. If you're interested in kind of getting around a community of people that are seeking wellness, go to wellnessseekerscommunity.com, wellnessseekerscommunity.com. That's it's a free private Facebook group. If you want to see my exact daily routine on how I maintain wellness on a daily basis, go ahead and click where it says free book and get your copy. And again, please do share, like, and comment on this post, and we will talk soon. Thank you.